So before I start this video, I want to put together a little competition. If you're a heavy metal band and you're serious about your productions, then I will mix one of your songs completely free of charge, and I'll be selecting 2 bands for this competition. Here's how it works. First, you have to like the video, subscribe, as well as leave a comment. In the description down below, I'm going to put a Gmail address where you can send your demos through to me, where I can take a listen to them and decide which 2 bands I'm going to choose for the mix competition. If you're just a mixing engineer and you know of any heavy metal bands that would be interested in this competition, feel free to share this video with them and have them follow the exact same instructions. In order to qualify for this mix competition, the multi-tracks have to be high quality and they have to be well edited. So I look forward to hearing from you. Let's get into the mix. Alright, so let's jump into this. Let's take a quick listen again to what this sounds like. Okay, so I'm just playing that little part of it. Yeah, I think let's just start with the MDL Ultimate Heavy Drums by Josh Middleton from Solosis. So this is a very cool kit. They are super mix ready. So I wouldn't suggest like using mix ready plugins straight from the gate when you're learning, because you want to learn how to EQ snares, EQ kicks, design different things from scratch, and not rely on something that's already been designed for you. When you've learned like a lot of that stuff at the beginning, then you can start implementing stuff like this for sound design, but not relying on it to give you the initial sound. So my approach is using this in a sound design approach, you know, because it might have some cool tones that I want to add. So we have the snare, which is in this case the premium Piccolo 14x4. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not using the cymbals. I actually like these cymbals. I always use Crim, but these are a little less harsh than the Crim cymbals. So I'm using these for the cymbals. So basically this is stock standard. I don't know if I've done anything inside of the mixer. Looks like the overheads are turned down. I think that's default. Everything's pretty much the same as you open it. So let's quickly take a look and see. Let's solo these drums and see what they sound like on their own. Okay, the cymbals might be slightly too loud. So maybe just turn them down like a dB. I think that's fine. Okay, so let's see if I've routed these anywhere. I don't always remember. Ah, fuck, that's super annoying here. Okay, so we have this kit. Okay, I haven't routed it anywhere. It's literally stuck how it is, and it's going to the master bus. And then the master bus. These things are so mix ready that you don't need to, you know, do much to them. So they're going to the master bus. Fuck's sakes. can't talk today, which has the FG Red, ratios at 3, attacks at 0.5, releases at 0, and then we have a bit of drive and a high pass at 80, and then also some more saturation with JST heat, up at 30%, and the mix is 20%. This just adds like a little bit of mid-range, and it cuts the transients off in a way that kind of kills a little bit of harshness. We got this at, I usually have that at 29, but it's fine. 20,000. I usually have that at like 17, so let me set it, otherwise it's going to annoy me. Okay, and then we just gain staging here because it increases the volume. Then going into a limiter, on the transparent mode, again, these modes drastically change the overall sonic picture of the mix, so it's always good to play with them. Okay. So I basically used this kit as like the basis, and it sounds really good. And then what I did is I started to build some samples. So as you'll see here, I have a whole lot of samples that I've blended in with them. So let's take a look at what I did to augment this kit and get it to fit with the guitars and the bass. So I'm going to play everything with all the samples on. Sorry, you probably can't see it here, but I'm just soloing all this stuff. Okay, drums, we have cymbals. So let me see, I don't think this verb is activated, but let's see what the entire drum kit sounds like with all the samples. Now I'll turn all the samples off. Samples back on. So you see, the idea of these samples is just to open up the snare and just give it a much bigger sound, but still keep the tone, pointing at the fucking screen again, still keep the tone of the ultimate heavy drums. So I'm selecting samples that make a good marriage with this particular tone. So that's the idea that I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to keep the tone of the kit, but just enhance it so that it sounds bigger and more of a modern production. So we'll listen again. I'll just activate all the samples as we go, so you can hear how these samples start filling in sort of the blank spaces. Sorry, let me bring this screen. Sorry, it's very annoying how this works. Let me just figure this out quick. Okay, cool. Get that up. Okay, I'm just gonna pull this here. Sorry, you have to see my desktop, but okay, so I think you should be able to see it. So I'm just going to start activating all the samples as we go, and then we'll see how they fill the kit in. So yeah, it just kind of makes it bigger sounding. That's the whole idea that I'm trying to achieve here. So if I switch all the samples off, I will show you what it sounds like in context with all the instruments. Now activate them on again. So you hear those samples are bringing the snare forward, so it's not buried, and it's giving it top end, it's giving it body, it's just like expanding it in a very pleasant way, and that's kind of the whole idea. So let's just take a look at what's going on with the samples and see how what that looks like. Okay, so first kick sample is this fucking drive me nuts. First kick sample is kick hard. It's some sample. Okay. So it has a similar characteristic to this kick from this kit. And then I think I wanted to do something here. Okay, this is probably, I don't know what that's from. I can't remember. Then the second kick. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is like the low end and the bloom of the kick. Like something that's very deep and thumpy, but has some attack as well. And you can hear that this gives it. Let me actually pull up a multi-band compressor to kind of show you what I'm talking about. No, don't do that. You hear how intense that is, and that's kind of what I'm trying to build with that kick, so that when you get the overall mix picture, you get this really sort of face melting low end in the kick. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to achieve with that. And then obviously the way that I'm doing this is I'm making sure that the kicks are that they pair well together, and that's just using my ears, listening and saying, okay, this sounds good, nah, this doesn't sound good, let's try this, or whatever the case may be. So let's it's got some nice room to it. These are both from Jens Borgren. It's the Sumo Sub and the Nice Mammoth. I know Jens has some funny names for his kicks. It's quite peculiar. Okay, so the first snare sample is this. See, now that's giving me that high end, that bright sort of sound to open the snare up, because it sounds very shit on its own, but when you blend it in, it's really good. So these kicks are both going to a kick sample bus, and these snares are, this one is going to the snare sample, the room one is going to a room bus, the next snare sample 3 is going to a snare sample bus, overheads going straight to the drums. So let's take a look at this one. I think this is from Andrew Wade, his sample pack. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but that's what it is. That's giving me that brightness. The next one is another very flat but really pleasant sounding room. I think this was from a Nail the Mix session, I think. Okay, so this, and then I flipped the polarity because it was out of phase. I don't know if phase is the right description for that, but whatever. This is from the Drum Forge. Let me take a look. I don't want to get it wrong. Yeah, Drum Forge Classic pack from, I think it's Joey Sturgis, Drum Forge. And this is kind of giving me that sort of, it's the overhead. It's the overhead sample from that pack. And that's just giving me some sort of hollowness to the snare and also some more expansion. You can hear how sort of big that sounds. And what I did is I just boosted 8K. So I'll switch it on and off. See, in context, it was sounding very sort of buried, and then I just brightened it up so that I can expand that snare a little bit more. Snares are exceptionally difficult to get right. For me, it's the hardest part of a mix, and if you're learning something like this, become an absolute monster at drum design. The drums are the foundation of the mix. If the drums fall apart, you'll make shit moves in the guitars and the bass. When you got a good drum sound, the rest becomes super easy. As soon as you have a really professional, expensive sounding drum kit, the rest of the mix becomes so easy. So drum design is where I would suggest anyone to put their focus on. That's what you need to get good at. And mix hundreds of songs. I've mixed songs, I think one song from Nail, or not even one, a few songs from Nail the Mix I've mixed over maybe 40 times just to, get it right. Persistence. And then snare overhead. Okay, this snare overhead I think is coming from GGD. Jeez. Huh. I didn't even know that I used this. Okay, well, here we go. So I'm using this overhead to further expand it and give it more of an ambience. And that's because snares in this genre need a lot of ambience to sound big and sort of three-dimensional. So I'm using the GGD PV kit P5 from Matt Halpin from Periphery. So basically I try different snares. I will put on a GGD kit. I will go through all kinds of snares, try the rooms, solo them out, and I'll kind of see hear what they do to the mix, and then that's how I build these drum designs. It's just find things that sound good and roll with them. Okay, and then on this snare, I'm probably cutting the mid-range. No, I'm not. That's interesting. Okay, so I am high passing just to get the top end of this overhead, because I don't want the low end, because when I was mixing it, the low end was doing something funny to the snare, which I didn't like, but I liked what the top end was doing, so that's why I did this move. And that's kind of things you can do to add more characters to the snare sound. So you'll hear if I bypass. You see, I didn't, all that low end was making the snare sound like shit, but the top end gave me what I was looking for. Because my fundamental note of the snare I already have with the main snare and all of these samples. The fundamental is already the way I wanted it, but there was sort of a top end brightness that was lacking. Cymbals, we just have this frequency sniper from JST. And this is basically put on dynamic, learn, and then it kind of shows you where all the problem areas are, and then you can just, and it's dynamically. It's subtle. And then let's go to the buses. So snare sum, I don't have anything on there. Is there anything going to snare sum? No, nothing. This is okay. Let me just take a quick look. I'm gonna just mind your ears. Okay, so we only have these buses. So here we have the kick samples. All these kick samples are going into this bus, and I'm just taking out some frequencies at 125. So how you hear this is like if you, okay, you see this line here. Usually these frequencies will be hitting up here, right? And when you play the mix, you can hear this, pointing at the fucking screen again, you can hear this frequency range sort of sitting above the snare, and that's kind of how you listen for it. So I'm going to play all the drums. Sorry, just let me okay, so when I play the drums and I deactivate this, listen to how this sort of area starts sitting above everything. So I'll play it with it on. You hear that? So as soon as I switch it off, that frequency area sort of like comes up, and it sort of doesn't sound like it's fitting with the kit. It's not centered and it's not put into perspective. So we'll do it again. See, it's sort of like sitting in the front of your face, or in the front of your hearing spectrum, and then when you bring it down, it sits right. And when you cut the low mids of the kick, you're going to get more emphasis on the fundamentals of the kick. So you can have some of this in. I like having some of this in, but this one needed to be brought down to where it sits comfortably with the snare. Yeah, that's a fucking hectic explanation, but I'm sure the guy who's ever watching this is smart enough to understand that. Okay, kick sample. Now we have the snare sample. Okay, that's... Sometimes I forget the shit that I do because I'm so in the moment when I'm doing it. Okay, so you hear how bright that is. It's because I'm trying to expand that the drum VST, that's the skeleton of the sound. I'm trying to expand that and just get it to sound brighter. So I have put the saturation up to 8, and then I've just done some transient designing by 1 dB, and this is just adding a bit more attack to it. And this is from the, well, you can see it's from Slate, obviously. And then I'm just boosting 8K, and then I am boosting a little bit at 1.2K by 2 dBs. And that's also just to bring a little bit more attack and presence out of it. So the way that I did this is I was just kind of fiddling. I was going between 1K to 3K and seeing what sounded right. And that's how I land on it. So I wouldn't suggest just going to 1.2K and boosting it. That's not good. You have to kind of understand what you're going for, play with it, boost it, see if it sounds nice, and then roll with it. But like just making, if you like make moves that you've seen someone else do on YouTube, you won't get anywhere. The reason why those people make those moves is because they're listening and they're like, maybe this will work, maybe that will work, and that's really the way to do it. Let's see. Okay, on the rooms. Cool. We have Transify, and I am just taking some attack out on the treble and on the mids and on the low ends, because the fundamental note of the rooms was a bit too much, and when you use a transient designer you can sort of soften that fundamental note and soften the artificialness in the high end and in the mid range. So I'll switch it on and off. See how it just pulls everything a little bit back. And when I first started mixing, I didn't understand what the fuck this thing was, how to use it, you know, excuse my French. Yeah, but now I get it. And then I'm just taking out some mid-range. Sometimes the mid-range in samples can be a bit too much, and you'll hear it. It's sort of got this boxiness. So I'm just taking that sort of boxy, papery kind of sound. Then all the samples and all the snare samples and rooms are going to a drum bus. It's a very unconventional way to mix. Usually I would have this entire the MDL Ultimate Heavy Drums. Usually I'll have all of that on separate channels going to a drum bus, but in this instance I don't have that because it didn't do what I wanted it to do. So on the drum bus I have all the samples, all the rooms and the cymbals. And I'm just using the BG drums on the tight mode. Barely 3 dBs and just 30%, and the mix dial on 50%. Just kind of taming them down a bit. Then I am boosting 10K, that's interesting, by 4 dBs. Because in the context of the guitars and everything, it sounded too... If this microphone is making funny noises, I'm sorry, I need to figure this out somehow to get a better setup for this. Because it was sounding too dull, so I boosted it. I'll show you. You hear the difference, huge difference. Then I was doing some minor stuff. So this mid-range again was a little bit too much, but I didn't want to cut it and like take the frequency away. I just wanted to dynamically control it. That's why I had this. And then in the top end, it was too much at 6K. This can be very harsh on the ears, so I just tamed it a bit. See how when I switch this off, you can hear those upper frequencies pushing up and they too much. So you hear how the cymbals and everything sits above everything else, and then when you tame it, it sort of brings it back down so that everything is in the same vicinity. Fuck. And you can see that little note is kind of going rogue. Then I have a limiter just to catch any peaks. Doesn't look like it's doing shit, but anyway. And if anyone's interested, the guitars are Fortin Nameless, going into the Neural DSP Granifier Omega Ampworks, with some shaping the DIs a bit, and a little bit of shaping before the DI, before it hits the amp. If anyone's interested, what guitars, what tone was used. And then they go to the instrumental with the FG Gray. Barely doing anything, just controlling, you know. And then it goes into a pre-master where I do some more shaping, but this is in context with the mix. And then boosting some 10K of the whole mix by 4.8. Yeah, 8.1 gives me, needed to be 8.0. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and this is kind of how I landed on this sound. Yeah, and then I basically just kept the bass as doesn't sound great on its own, but yeah, I might revisit that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this. If you have any questions or you want to leave comments and stuff like that, feel free to do that, and subscribe. That would be awesome. That really helps. And click notification bell. And thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.